It's strange how we only understand the depth of pain when it's consumed us all. I spent my life believing I had a home, a wife, a child, a family, but what I actually had was a silent theater, and I was the only idiot who didn't know I was the clown in the play. Today, at 84, what weighs most heavily on me isn't my age, it's the shame, it's the humiliation, it's this dirty silence I've been forced to swallow for decades, because my wife, the woman I loved with every ounce of my heart, spent years in bed with my son, and then would return to our bed as if nothing had happened. She would kiss my forehead. She would tell me she loved me. She would serve me coffee with that lavender scent on her apron. And I still thought I was lucky to have a woman like her. And me? I cared for the boy. I called him my son. I raised him with affection, with pride, with love. I went to his school recital. I taught him how to ride a bike. I stayed up nights when he had a fever. I shouted to the world that this was my son, and he called me father with a sweetness that hurts me more today than any truth, because I believed, because I loved, because I was the only one in that house who knew nothing, and yet I was the only one who truly loved. The letter arrived too late. Antoine, my natural son, was dying in Lyon, and he wrote to me before he left. He said he needed to die clean, and he wrote coldly, as if pouring gasoline on a heart already on fire. Luc is my son, my father, with Hélène. That was it, and everything collapsed. Sometimes we only begin to die when we stop telling the truth, and it was in that silence that everything began to rot inside, even if no one saw. It was there that the old man I was fell silent, and the wounded, betrayed and forgotten man began, for the first time, to remember everything. And now I need to tell it, because this story still burns in my chest, and perhaps telling it is the only way to keep breathing. I almost didn't have the courage to tell this. The truth still hurts today, and there are times when it seems like no one will understand. Talking hurts, but keeping it in, it killed me slowly. I'm not telling you this out of curiosity. I'm telling you because I need to, because there are things that, if we don't let go, rot inside. So, show that I'm not talking to myself. Leave your like and stay with me until the end. Subscribe to the channel, because there are still things I've never had the courage to say. And maybe today I'll be able to if you stay with me until the end. My name is Marcel Delaunay. I'm 84 years old. And what I'm about to tell you now, not even the priest in my town had the courage to hear it through to the end. It's hard to even breathe sometimes, as if the air is trapped between your throat and your memory. There are things we don't keep because we want to. We keep them because we don't know how to let them out. And when they come out, it hurts as if they're being born. That's what I feel now, as if I'm giving birth to a rotten truth, one that's grown inside me like a hidden tumor. I live alone, in a small house in the French countryside. It's not big, but it has a smell that reminds me of who I was. Old wood, stale coffee and laundry washed with bar soap. In winter the fireplace crackles, and the house seems to sigh with me. In summer, the silence is so dry that even the paintings seem to fade. Just today, before turning, on this recorder I looked at her photograph on the dresser. Hélène, my wife, smiling in that blue dress she wore on our 3rd wedding anniversary, and I spoke to her, as I do every day. Only today, I didn't ask for a blessing. I asked for courage, because what I'm about to say, she would never have let anyone hear. This is the story of how the woman I loved betrayed me with my own son, and how I raised, with love, with guilt, with a shame that still claws at me inside, their son, as if he were my own. Only those who have felt the ground open up inside them and still remained standing will understand what I'm about to tell you. But now I won't be silent anymore. I remember one day in particular. It was cold. The frost hadn't yet melted on the front steps. I'd gotten up early, as I always did, put water on to boil, and made coffee. The kettle whistled softly, and its sound echoed through the hallway as if waking ghosts. Hélène was still asleep, or pretending. I was never sure. But that day, something was different. It was as if the air was thicker, the silence louder. I picked up the cup, sat in the armchair by the window, and stayed there, watching the mist hide the trees in the backyard. I enjoyed that moment. It was mine. No one spoke, no one asked for anything. It was just me and the bitter coffee. Only, that morning, the taste seemed different. There was a bitterness that didn't come from the grounds. It came from within, from the soul. I could feel it. Minutes later, she appeared in the hallway, wearing a white nightgown, her hair tied back with a crooked ribbon, her feet dragged on the wooden floor. She always walked straight past into the kitchen and asked me if the bread was fresh, but that day she stopped. She stared at me for a moment, just a moment, but it was enough for me to feel my skin heat up. "Did you sleep well?" I asked. She nodded, but didn't respond with her voice. And that silence was the first thing that truly hurt me, because it wasn't exhaustion, it was fear or guilt or both. You know when something's wrong, but you pretend you don't feel it? Because if you do, you have to do something. And doing something sometimes is more painful than swallowing hard. Well, that's what I did. I swallowed hard. I pretended nothing had changed. But everything had already changed. We lived like clockwork. I'd go out to work in the fields, come back dirty and exhausted, and she'd wait for me with a hot dinner and cold eyes. I'd kiss her forehead, and she'd turn her head away gently. She'd say she had a headache, or sleepy. Sometimes she wouldn't even say anything. And I accepted it, because I thought that was what true love was. Swallowing absence with a knife and fork, and still being grateful. And then he came, my son, Antoine. Handsome, intelligent, sharp-eyed. I always thought he took after his mother. Not Hélène, the other one. The one who abandoned me when he was little. Antoine came to live with us when he was grown. And I wanted so much for them to get along, for her to be the mother he never had. And for a while, I thought she was. But there was something there, something unsaid, something hidden behind the glances, behind the doors that closed too quickly, behind the laughter that ceased when I entered the room. And yet, I remained silent, because the fear of losing what remained was greater than the courage to face what I feared discovering. And it went on like that for months, years maybe, and I pretended to be blind, deaf. I pretended to be a man who doesn't feel, who doesn't think, who only works and sleeps. But inside I was dying, a little bit every day. One night she left a blouse on the couch, a blouse that wasn't hers, it was his, and I knew it in that instant, but still I pretended not to see it. I just folded it, placed it on the back of the couch, and went to sleep. That same night, I had a strange dream. I dreamed. I was trapped inside the house, and all the windows were locked. I screamed, but no one heard. She was outside, with him, laughing, and I woke up with the taste of blood in my mouth, as if I'd bitten my tongue in desperation. This may all seem like an exaggeration to those who've never been betrayed, but I swear on everything I have left that the pain of being deceived by the one you love is a knife that doesn't cut quickly. It cuts slowly, day after day, until you no longer know where. It hurts, and that's why I speak now, because I can't carry this alone anymore. Because even after everything, I was a father, I was a husband, I was a home, and I was silence. Do you know what it's like to look into the eyes of the woman you love and see the reflection of another man? Do you know what it's like to hear your son call your wife maman, and wonder what else he called her on the nights you weren't there? I kept quiet, because I thought protecting what was left of my family was better than facing the shame of knowing the truth. But today I don't know if I did the right thing. It was March 1971, and Rocamadour still breathed with the slowness of someone waking from winter. Spring was approaching, but the wind remained biting in the early morning hours. The village's ancient stones held centuries of silence, and the smell of warm bread mingled with the blossoming flowers gave the air a sweetness known only to the French countryside. I walked with my hands in, my pockets, my hat askew, my shoulders heavy from a lifetime of trying. Back then I just wanted to live in peace, without big dreams, without loud noises, just silence, honest work, and a house that smelled of food at the end of the day. It was at a market, one of those simple markets with stalls selling vegetables, fabrics, and strong cheeses, that I first saw Elaine. She was wearing a light dress, her hair tied in a high bun, and she held a straw basket as if she carried an entire world. Within, she didn't smile right away, but her gaze seemed like something from another time. She stared at me for a second longer than usual, as if she recognized me from somewhere that didn't even exist. She was beautiful, beautiful in a calm, steady way, like someone who knew exactly what she wanted but wouldn't say it. Helene was cultured. She spoke of books and classical music with ease, but she also knew how to laugh out loud, laugh at nothing, laugh with gusto. We spoke for a short time that day, but it was enough. I left with an apple in my hand and a knot in my chest. She gave me the apple. The knot was life. At that time I was preparing to welcome Antoine, my oldest son. He was 11 years old, and he was coming to live with me after his mother separated. It was her decision. He said he needed to live again, whatever that meant. Antoine was a quiet boy with deep-set eyes, the kind who carries more than he can say. I wasn't sure how he would arrive. If he would bring hurt, anger, or just the weariness of a broken home. But I was willing. I wanted to be a real father, to start over, even with my soul full of patches. The first meeting between him and Helene was calm. She opened the door with a restrained smile, offered him hot chocolate, and he accepted without looking her in the eye. But in the following days, something changed. She began treating him with an almost exaggerated delicacy. She made his favorite dish without him telling her, asked about the cartoons he watched, complimented his handwriting, even when it was just a crooked scrawl. I watched all this with relief. After all, how lucky I was to find such a sweet woman who welcomed my son as if he were her own. Only later did I understand that sometimes excessive zeal isn't love. It's a disguise. But back then I didn't see any of that. I just saw them laughing together, walking in the garden, her straightening the collar of his coat with a patience not every mother possesses. And I was moved by it, because deep down I wanted to believe that this was my chance to build a new family, clean, without the scars the previous one left. I'd come back from the field and hear them in the living room. She reading stories, he lying on her lap. Sometimes he'd doze off like that. And I, standing in the doorway, my hands still covered in dirt, felt a tightness in my chest of gratitude. Little did I know that that tightness would one day turn into another kind of pain. But that spring of 1971, there was no storm in the air. Just the sound of the wind in the trees, the smell of soup on the stove, and a silent hope that made me smile even when the day had been hard. Everything felt too right, and maybe that was the first sign, because when everything seems too perfect, that's when the heart should start to suspect. Over time, things began to change, but so slowly, so subtly, it felt like just part of growing a new family. But the heart feels before the mind. Understands, and I did, but I refused to put it into words, because certain truths, when spoken, change everything, and I wasn't ready to see my world crumble. I preferred the comfort of lies. I observed small gestures, laughter that lasted too long, silences that weighed heavily where there had once been conversation, long touches on shoulders, on hair that seemed more intimate than a mother's caress. But then that dirty thought crept into my head, and I pushed it away, angry with myself. What kind of man doubts his own wife? What kind of father distrusts the child he raised? That's what I asked myself every time my stomach churned at the sight of them together. At dinner time, I'd sometimes come home tired from the field, take off my boots at the door, smell the hot soup in the air, and find them whispering in the kitchen. When they saw me, they'd stop. Hélène would fix her hair. Antoine would stir his spoon. I'd pretend not to notice. I'd sit at the table and ask about the day. She'd speak for both of us. He'd smile but without showing his teeth, and I'd swallow my food along with my doubt. There was a night that marked me in a way that still haunts my dreams today. I returned from the farm early that day. Back pain made me abandon the last batch of planting. The sky was already darkening, and the wind blew coldly through the trees. When I entered the house, I heard no footsteps or voices, only a muffled murmur coming from the kitchen. I opened the door, slowly, and found them there. Antoine was sitting at the counter, and Hélène had her back to me, cutting something. The scent of apple and cinnamon filled the air, but there was something else there, something the nose can't sense. A tension, a strange warmth. When they noticed my presence, the silence came like a slap. She turned too quickly. He jumped down from the counter. They both smiled, but eyes don't lie. Hers were slightly red, as if she'd been crying or holding back. His, low, avoiding mine. "You're early today," she said. "My back pain is back," I replied, slowly taking off my coat. She came to me, ran her hand over the back of my neck with an automatic but cold gesture. She kissed my forehead, a dry kiss, and in that kiss, I knew. Not what exactly, but that something there no longer belonged to me. But even so, I remained silent. I continued to believe what I wanted to be true. I preferred to think it was an old man's foolish jealousy, that it was all in my head, that it was my insecurity, not their betrayal. The worst part was that they gave me reasons to trust. Antoine would bring Hélène wildflowers. He said it was out of gratitude. She would laugh and put them in the same vase in the living room where the flowers I picked used to be. I began to notice. My flowers would wilt in the corner. His would get fresh water. And when she laughed with him, oh, how she laughed. She laughed freely. She laughed loudly. She laughed in a way she hadn't laughed with me in a long time. I asked simple questions, just to keep the conversation alive. "And school, Antoine?" "Okay, Dad." Short, quick, without looking into the eyes. And she added, "He's been trying so hard. He's a wonderful boy. I'm so proud of him." A pride, the word cut me like a knife, because it seemed like she was saying it while looking at him, like someone looking at a man, not a boy. One time, I went into his room to drop off some laundry. It was empty. On the desk, I saw a sheet of paper, a poem, a handwriting, similar to hers. It spoke of forbidden love, of secrets that hurt. I didn't read it to the end. Trembling, I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I burned it later, and with it, I also burned the little piece I had left. It was like being in a leaky boat, pretending the sea was calm. And every time a wave threatened to capsize everything, I covered my eyes, pretending it was just the wind. But there's a kind of wind that doesn't blow for nothing. It warns, and at that time he was already warning me. I just didn't want to listen. I was already an old man when the truth finally dawned. But it wasn't age that prepared me for the pain. No wrinkles, no grey hairs, no silence too long could have prepared me for it. Because some pains don't grow old with us. They just hide deeper, waiting for the right moment to tear us apart. Luke had just turned 22. I remember it well, because I made a cake with my own hands, even though my fingers were already a little crooked from arthritis. He came in laughing, hugged me like he always did, and said it was the best cake in the world. And I cried in the bathroom afterward, hidden. I cried with pride. I cried watching him grow. I cried because I couldn't explain that tightness in my chest. Little did I know that deep down, it was the omen of something that had already been coming, slowly, like a storm growing on the horizon, and we pretend it's just a cloud. 3 weeks later, the letter arrived. The envelope was plain, brown paper, no return address, but the postmark read Lyon and the previous day's date. I recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. It was Antoine, my son, my flesh and blood. The same boy who walked into my house years ago with his bag on his back and a world in his eyes. The same boy who grew up under my roof and under my wife's gaze. I sat at the kitchen table, put on my reading glasses, and opened them. My hands were shaking. Perhaps they already knew what was coming, but my head still clung to one last illusion. The letter was short, to the point, raw, without emotion, without apologies, just the truth, harsh, violent, definitive. Wow. By the time you read this, I may no longer be in this world. Forgive me for writing and not speaking sooner, but there are things we can only say when we know we're going to die. I can't leave with that weight. Luc is not your son. Luc is my son, with Helene. It all started when I was 17. It was wrong. It was ugly, but it was real. I swear I tried to stop, but I couldn't. Hate me if you want, but I had to tell you. Goodbye. The leaf fell to the ground, and for a moment I thought the ground had fallen with me. My spine froze. My entire body lost its strength. My arms felt heavy as stone. My eyes didn't blink. I stood there, motionless, as if my soul had left, leaving only a shell. The whole world had become a poorly staged theatre, and I realized with cruel clarity that I was the only one who still believed in the script. I was the clown in the play, the fool, the last to know. I got up slowly. I went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. The face staring back at me looked like a stranger's. There was a tear trapped in the corner of my eye, but it wouldn't fall. It was as if even the tears were embarrassed to come out. I turned on the tap. I washed my face. The water was too cold. Or maybe it was just my skin that no longer felt the heat. I returned to the living room. I picked up the letter. I read it again and again and again, hoping that with each new reading the words would change, that there would be an ending, an explanation, a regret. But no, that was all it was. Luc wasn't my son. He was my son's son, and the son of the woman who slept beside me for decades. Everything I've lived, everything I've built, every birthday, every hug, every "Daddy, I love you." Was it a lie or was it love? Even if it was a lie, I can't say how long I stood there holding the letter. Night fell. I didn't turn on the lights. I stood in the dark, staring into space, hearing only the sounds of the house. Wood creaking, wind against the window, my own heart pounding so hard as if it wanted to escape my chest. Then I went to Luc's room. He wasn't there. He'd gone out to meet friends. His bed was unmade. His coat was thrown over the chair. And on the desk, a picture of us. He, small, sat on my shoulders, smiling. And I was smiling too. Two sincere smiles. Two smiles that in that moment hurt more than any blow. I thought about screaming, about destroying everything, about burning the letter, the house, the pictures, the memories, but I couldn't. What I did was sit on the edge of his bed and cry. For the first time in a long time, I cried with true pain. The pain of losing everything, the pain of being deceived, the pain of loving someone who was never mine. My head was spinning. The question lingered. How many times had Helene looked at me with that secret in her eyes? How many nights had she slept beside me, knowing I was lying? How many times had Luc held me without knowing who I really was? Or did you know? And me, in the middle of all this, what was I? Father? Grandfather, fool. The truth is, there, that night, in that cold house with an open letter on my lap, I died a little, and what was left standing was all that was left of me. You know, there's pain that doesn't make a sound, but it lives in the body like an animal. It eats away at you from the inside, slowly, gentle, unhurried, and I still hear that sound to this day, the letter's paper crumpling between my fingers, as if crumpling it might erase what was written. But it doesn't turn off. Nothing turns off. Have you ever had your entire life destroyed by a single sentence on a piece of paper? Because I had. And to this day I don't know what was worse, knowing the truth, or continuing to love even after it. I put the letter away. I folded it slowly, as if each crease were a wound reopening in my chest. I didn't have the courage to tear it or burn it, much less show it to anyone. It was as if that piece of paper had become a living, breathing secret inside my drawer, a silent yet loud presence. It screamed every night, even without saying a word, and I heard it. Only I. No one else knew. Not Luke. Not anyone else. There was no room in the world for such a truth. It was too big to share with. Another heart. I looked at the boy, the man I'd raised, and everything inside me trembled. The way he called me Dad, the ease with which he'd flop onto the couch and say, "Did you see my team yesterday?" The laughter on the porch with a glass of wine. None of that changed. But everything had changed. Inside me, something broke and wouldn't hold together again. The cruelest thing of all was love. Because, despite everything, I still loved him. As if he were mine, because he was, not by blood, but by presence. I was the one who cleaned his scraped knees. I was the one who taught him to tie his shoelaces. I was the one who stayed up all night when he had a fever. I was the one who cried at his first school performance. I was the one who watched him fall in love. I was the one who watched him grow up. And all of this now lived alongside a pain that wouldn't go away. A love and a pain living together in the same heart. Days after the letter, when my hands stopped shaking and my throat accepted the bitter morning coffee again, I knew what I needed to do. Not to fix it, not to forget, but to give back what should never have been mine. I grabbed my thick coat, a new envelope, and the saddest path I could remember. The old Saint-Étienne cemetery, the place where she rested, the place where perhaps she would listen to me, if the dead can listen to those they've broken. It was a grey morning, the sky overcast as if even it were embarrassed to open. Dry leaves crunched beneath my feet. The iron gate creaked with a sound that seemed more alive than anything around it. I entered slowly. I walked between the graves, each step an effort to keep from collapsing. I arrived at her grave, a simple headstone with the name Hélène Delaunay engraved in worn letters. No fresh flowers, no lit candles, only silence. The same silence she always carried in her eyes. That silence that today haunts me. I knelt. My legs ached. My knee cracked. The icy wind cut through my coat. But I felt nothing, nothing but the weight that weighed me down inside. I took the envelope from my pocket and placed it at the foot of the tombstone, among the moss and stones. I stared at it for long minutes, as if it were going to come out and look me in the eye, but it didn't. It didn't even look at me. It didn't even respond, just silence. And then I spoke. For the first time, I spoke out loud, but my voice came out low, hoarse, broken. May it rot there in the same silence you created, in the same silence that killed me inside. I didn't cry, not then, because there were no more tears, just a dry, rough emptiness that doesn't wet the eyes. It just scratches inside, a kind of grief that has no name, because it's not for who he died. It's for who killed without laying a finger. I struggled to my feet. My legs felt shaky, my heart heavier than ever, and I left, without looking back, because if I did, I might come back and scream, and I had already learned to keep my mouth shut. Ever since then, I've carried that silence with me, a silence that screams when I see Luke smile, when he calls me Dad, when he hugs me tightly, when he speaks proudly of me to his friends, and I smile back. Because this is my role now, to pretend I don't know, to pretend I am. But inside, oh, inside, every word of his is a sweet stab, a love that hurts me, a pain that embraces me. And sometimes I wonder, if she saw me today, still silent, still taking care of the child she had with another man, would she regret it, or would he remain silent, Luke calls Metabel with such tenderness that for a moment sometimes I almost forget. I forget what I know. I forget the letter. I forget the pain. There's only that moment, that word coming out of his mouth as if it were made for me. He's called me that since he was little, when he'd slide down the slide and run to me with open arms, when he'd wake up scared in the middle of the night and come ask to sleep in my bed, when as a teenager he'd call me crying because of some heartbreak and just say, "Dad, say something," always like that, as if I were shelter. And I went, even without knowing everything, I went. And after I knew, I continued to be. I was the one who held him on his first night home, still wrapped in a blanket, smelling of milk and warm skin. I was the one who took him to the doctor when he first had a high fever. I was the one who waited in the waiting room for 2 hours when he broke his arm at school. I was the one who taught him to swim in the icy river behind the house. I was the one who stood in the audience, teary-eyed at the poetry recital. He, nervous, reciting verses with a shaky voice. No one else went, only me. It was I who heard the first cry. It was I who carried him on my shoulders through the streets of Rocamadour, proud, as if he were carrying the world. The blood became just a detail in the face of all this. But this truth hurts. It hurts because, even with everything I've done, everything I've been, there's a space inside me that doesn't belong to me, a space I can never fully occupy, because deep down, it's not mine. It never was. I was the father, but I'm not the father, and it's in this abyss between what I lived and what's real that my soul still reels to this day. I often found myself holding the letter in my hands, already worn, already yellowed, as if time had tried to erase it. I thought about showing it. I thought about telling everything. I thought about shouting the truth like someone pouring gasoline on the past, but I didn't. I never did. And maybe that was cowardice. Maybe I was afraid of losing what I had left, afraid of seeing in his eyes the same astonishment I saw in my own when I read those words, afraid of seeing love die. But it could also have been love, a different kind of love, silent, dirty, humble, a love that bleeds but protects, a love that gives up recognition just to remain present. Maybe I chose love, and with it the weight of living with the truth stuck in my throat. There are nights when I sit on the balcony and gaze at the Rocamadour sky. The stars here are shy. They hide behind the mist, like me. I hide behind my fatherly role, smiling, advising, listening, without ever telling him everything I know. And when he arrives with his joy, his plans, his youth, I pretend the world is still whole, that nothing has been broken, that life hasn't stolen me. Pretending sometimes is surviving. He'll never know, because he doesn't deserve to carry this pain, because it's not his fault. He's just the result of a mistake I chose to love, and I will continue to love him until my last day. And if you ask me at the end of my life what hurt me the most, I will say having to pretend I didn't know, just so I wouldn't destroy what I loved. But if you ask me what I'm most proud of, I'll also say of having chosen love, even with the truth. Hélène looked me in the eyes every morning, with the same serenity as always, with that restrained, almost rehearsed manner, as if she knew exactly what to do to appear innocent. She kissed my forehead gently, and her scent, that discreet, floral perfume she'd worn since our 2nd year of marriage, clung to me all day. The coffee was ready before I came downstairs. The cup was on the table, the bread was cut, the silence between us filled with automatic gestures of a routine that for me was love, and for her, perhaps, was just an act. Today I wonder, how did she do it? How can someone smile with such a dirty soul? How do you look into the eyes of a man who trusts you, who loves you without reservation, and yet keeps such a devastating secret? She hid an abyss, a dark hole where the guilt one doesn't want to carry is buried, where the screams that never come out are drowned. And me, I slept beside this abyss. I kissed this abyss. I made love to it, thinking it was true love. Some betrayals come with screams, with scandals, with slammed doors and thrown clothes on the floor. Hers didn't. Hers came with silence, with eyes that subtly averted, with an affection that, little by little, lost its soul, with absences she disguised with excessive attention. This is cruel, crueler than the act itself, because when the lie is gentle, it creeps in, unnoticed, and when you realize it, you've already been poisoned. You no longer know what's true. You no longer know what was real. Antoine, my son, was weak, an insecure, needy boy, broken from an early age. I don't want to justify it, but I understand. Maybe he just gave in to something that confused him. He was young, vulnerable, and yet he made a mistake. He hurt. He betrayed me. But part of me still manages to look at him with a certain bitter compassion. But she was cold. She was cruel. She was an adult, conscious, lucid. She knew what she was doing. She knew what she was breaking. She knew what she was stealing from me. And yet she continued. What do you do with this pain? What do you do with this kind of emptiness, where the certainty resides that you were deceived day after day, while you made plans, while you dreamed, while you smiled? I was building a life while she dug my ruin, inch by inch, with the same smile that made me fall in love. And yet, and that's what destroys me more than anything, still, she's the only woman I've ever truly loved. It may seem crazy, it may seem weak, but it's the most painful truth I have to tell. I love Helen, not what she did, but what she was to me, or what I believed she was. The woman who tended the garden while listening to Edith Piaf on the old radio. The woman who said she loved the way I finger-combed my hair. The woman who laughed at me when I forgot my keys and locked us out. This woman, I loved this woman, and I continue to love her, even knowing what she did. Love doesn't disappear just because the truth comes out. It doesn't fade with betrayal. It stays, and that's why it hurts so much, because it remains in the wrong place. There are days when I sit on the edge of the bed, look to the side, and still expect to see the pillow sinking under her weight, and then reality slaps me. A slow slap, a slap without a hand, just absence, just the echo of what was. I wonder sometimes what she felt while she was cheating on me, if she felt guilty, if she cried in secret, if she looked at me sleeping and thought, what am I doing? Or if, deep down, she just felt nothing, because there are people who live without a soul, or with their soul so buried, they no longer feel when they break someone else's. And I stay here, trying to understand what hurts more, having been betrayed, or still loving the person who betrayed me. Do you think it's possible to love someone who destroyed everything you had? Do you think love can resist even lies? Today, at 84, I wake up slowly. My body no longer responds as it once did. My bones ache before I even step foot on the floor. My memory fails me sometimes. I forget a neighbor's name, the day of the week where I left my glasses. But there are things you never forget, certain pains, certain images, certain smells. And among all the memories time has failed to erase, there's one that recurs every day. Luke walking through the front door with a smile on his face, and that hurried manner of someone afraid I've been alone for too long. He takes care of me. He brings me my medicine, straightens my socks, makes coffee like I used to make for him. He calls me table with the same naturalness he used to call me when I was 4 or 5. He listens to me patiently when I repeat the same story for the 10th time. He hugs me on birthdays and always says, "You're my hero." And I smile. I smile with a tight throat because he'll never know. He'll never imagine. And maybe that's why I love him so much. Luke is the only one who stayed. When everything fell apart inside me, when the truth silently ate away at me, when the world became a place where I no longer fit, he stayed. innocent, whole, true. He is my anchor, even without knowing it. He is the reason I wake up every day and keep going, even with my soul scarred. He is the one who makes me believe that, even after the lies, love still exists. And no, he'll never know, because this truth isn't his. It's mine, and I chose to bury it with me, not out of cowardice, though sometimes I wonder if it isn't, but because the only way to protect the ones we love sometimes is to remain silent. I've learned this over the years, through pain. Being a father is enduring the unbearable. It's swallowing tears, anger, shame, and still smiling out of love. It's accepting that not everything will be fair, not everything will be clear, but that even so, it's worth continuing to love. I don't have many certainties anymore. Life, in the end, empties us of absolute truths. What once seemed right becomes doubt. What seemed wrong sometimes proves inevitable. But I know one thing. I was the father Luke knew. I was his home, his embrace, his voice, and that no one can take away. Today, when he brings me the newspaper and sits with me on the porch, as Hélène did in those early years, I watch his face. The way he frowns when he reads a bad headline, the way he stirs his coffee without sugar, and I think he has his father's features, but he has my soul. The anger has passed, the grief too, the shame still comes sometimes in small waves. But I let it go. I don't fight it anymore. I just let it come, let it hurt, and then I let it go, because what remains, in the end, isn't the wound. It's what we did to it. I loved Hélène, and I still do in some dark place in my heart, but love is now a memory. Sad, beautiful and tarnished. Antoine, I've forgiven. I don't know if I would do everything the same if I could go back in time, but I know I don't want to die with hate. I want to die lightly. And lightness sometimes is letting go of trying to understand. Luke, oh Luke, he is my redemption, the son I didn't father, but who was born within me. He grew up within my routine, my tenderness, my pain, and even if his blood isn't mine, the love he carries is. Life is made of choices, and I chose to love, even though I was broken, even though I knew, even though I didn't know if I deserved it, because love, in the end, is this, continuing, even after the end. Do you think everyone has a secret they've never told anyone? Do you think that, in my place, you would have done differently? I took a deep breath just now. The sun is setting outside, and the sky in Rocamadour has that watery wine color, beautiful and sad. Like so many things in my life, telling all this hurt, more than I imagined, but hiding it for so long was what killed me the most inside. Every morning in silence, every hug, I returned with a trembling soul. The truth weighs heavily, but swallowing it, alone, weighs even more. You listened to me until the end, and that changes everything for me. Even without seeing you, I felt someone was there, sitting with me on this porch, with an open heart. And that, for an old man like me, is so rare. So, comment here with the word true if you too have had to live in silence so as not to destroy someone you loved. Leave a like. Follow the channel. Maybe someone else needs to hear this too. And if this already hurt you, get ready, because the next story in the video that is appearing on the screen is cruel and dramatic. Before you know it, you will have tears coming out of your eyes. Click and come with me for another painful confession, but it will be the first step towards healing an old wound.